we have Rick Rule, who is the chairman of Sprott USA, interviewing Doug Casey, chairman and founder of Casey Research. Doug's latest book is totally incorrect. Both Rick and Doug have been exceptionally prescient about the path that the world has taken. They understand how the world works and how human beings think. They base their understanding of the world on reason and evidence, not on superstitious faith. They speak their mind fearlessly, and that's what you're going to see now. They understand that compromise is a slippery slope, and that once you compromise, you compromise your integrity and speak and behave based on irrational expectations. You confuse your mind. The term political correctness is not in their vocabularies. A lot of people turn to them to understand the meaning and consequences of the world events. Using these understandings, they have both been exceptionally successful in turning the predicament to their advantage and of their times. I have been one of the beneficiaries. Ladies and gentlemen, it's my huge honor and pleasure to invite my two mentors, Doug and Rick.
All right. Thank you, Jayant. I've wanted, ever since I got to know Doug in the mid-'80s, to have the opportunity to roast him on stage. And this may be the best opportunity I ever get. You haven't given me liberty to roast him, so I'll merely ask you questions. In the tradition of Walter Block, I have to begin by contradicting the person who introduced us. That was a kind introduction, but neither Doug nor I have any idea how the world organizes itself. And mostly, I think, when we talk to each other, we come to the conclusion we don't give a shit. What we both try and do, I think, is get through life based on outcomes that we hope to achieve for ourselves. And one of the things that Doug taught me is that it's important to surround yourself with people who amuse you as opposed to people who you detest. Doug taught me that 30 years ago, and Jayant, we both want to thank you for giving us the opportunity today to surround ourselves with people who amuse us and hopefully we amuse. So Doug, the topic that Jayant has assigned us is how to avoid thinking like a serf. There's nobody I can think of that I'd rather have that discussion with, in fact, than you. And I recall a very important day in my life many years ago when I was driving you from Los Angeles Airport to San Diego, and you asked me if we could stop in and visit a friend of yours, a strange guy named John Pugsley, which we did. And I remember in the meeting with John Pugsley, I had no political beliefs then at all, or at least I didn't think I did. I think I was nominally Republican, actually. But I was a, pot-smoking, war-objective Republican. And I remember that you asked me when you and Jack were there about what my politics were, because you guys were talking politics. I said, Doug, I'll leave the other guy alone. I want him to leave me alone. I remember that Pugsley said, oh, you're a libertarian. And all I knew about libertarians were that they hung out in airport lobbies. They had signs supporting this goofball Lyndon LaRouche. They wanted to kill whales and they didn't like Jane Fonda. I was thinking, well, I like whales more than Lyndon LaRouche, and I certainly think Jane Fonda's pretty good than Lyndon LaRouche. And I remember you and Jack gave me this book, Economics in One Lesson. And said, sort of like the doctor would say, here's a aspirin, take it, call in the morning. And that was really useful. What I want to know is how you came to here. How old were you when you figured out that you were responsible for the outcomes that you wanted in life? And how did you come to that?
Well, I think libertarianism is a genetic mutation. I really do. Which is, in some ways, if I'm right, that's a pessimistic view, because it means that most people are not amenable to it because they are the way they are genetically. Anyway, I've always been a gut libertarian, but when I was a kid, I can tell you what my personal political progress was, is the first thing that I ever remember in my life that was was political related was my mother and I grew up in Chicago, and we were driving through a bad part of town, all these black people living in slums, and I asked her about it, and what she said, but I got the idea Eisenhower was the president then, and I was about 7 years old, 6, 7 years old. I asked her to write a letter to President Eisenhower asking him to do something about all these poor black people. So I started out as a liberal, I guess, in my political thinking. And then I read Barry Goldwater's Conscience of a Conservative when I was in high school, and it made a lot of sense. It's actually a pretty good book by a conservative. He's a libertarian conservative. I became a conservative. And then I read Ayn Rand's Virtue of Selfishness, which crystallized everything for me. And I do remember I had to put the book down after the first page because I couldn't believe somebody had written exactly what I thought, but I had not been able to formulate. And for a while, I've got to say, I was a Randite. But then I read The Market for Liberty by Morris and Lyndon Tannehill, which I recommend highly to everybody here, which is in defense of anarchism. I never once uses the word anarchism, but that's exactly what it is. It's very good. And I became an anarchist. And since then, I think I've evolved further. I've become a Discordian. And I got that term incidentally from, there was a book, was it Harry Thorne that wrote that book? Anyway, I forget. But it's where I first started to realize, wait a minute, all these people have laws. The liberals got lots of laws. Conservatives have lots of laws. They're just a little bit different. Libertarians still got laws. Even anarchists have laws, you know. Well, just 2 laws. They're pretty easy. Do all you say you're going to do, and don't aggress against other people or their property. So, I mean, you violate those sometimes, but you try not to. They're easy to remember. There's only 2 of them. But I figured, you know, just like physicists are trying to put all the laws reduced down to 1, you know, to merge electromagnetism and gravity and the strong and weak nuclear forces. So it's just 1 law. And I think I've done that morally. That law is the only thing you have to remember is do as thou wilt, but be prepared to accept the consequences. And if you just think about that before you do anything, then you'll think about what you're doing and the implications of it. And I think if you're a decent human being, and believing in Pareto's law, probably 80% of people are basically decent human beings, be prepared to accept the consequences. So that's my evolution. So I'm kind of an evolutionary dead end in this world.
The consequences for you have been pretty good for the most part. You've lived an interesting life, you've made a lot of money, you've tried to travel. I think in terms of the outcomes, you might not have planned your outcomes when you were young, but you've gotten through life mostly in a fashion that amused you. You talk about your philosophical and political progression, but people who focus solely on philosophy and politics often starve, and you've managed to avoid that. As I recall from earlier discussions, your academic preferences were somewhat varied. At one point in time, you actually set out to be a school teacher. I'm curious if you had read The Virtue of Selfishness before you set out to be a school teacher, first of all. And secondly, what was the progression from aspiring school teacher to selling disability insurance to lawyers, to becoming a gold stockbroker, to becoming the guru? Was any of this planned? And I mean, how did you affect the other outcomes in your life aside from your political progression?
Well, you You know, I have never had any plan in my life at all. The closest thing I've come to a plan is you come to a fork in the road, you take it. And, you know, so many times in my life, so many times, if I had turned right instead of turned left, I would have been living in an alternate reality. So that's probably one of the reasons why I'm a solipsist or have inclinations that way.
Tell people what a solipsist is, that you had to know for me a decade ago.
A solipsist is somebody, there are many variations on this theme, but basically, it's somebody that believes that all of reality is just a construct in your own mind. It's all in your head. None of this really exists. Well, it's more complicated and nuanced than that, but you know, that's kind of what it is. Everything's a kind of a figment of your imagination, or perhaps our collective imaginations. And maybe there's some scientific proof to that. But in any event, I didn't aspire to be a school teacher. Actually, that's not actually quite correct. After I got out of Georgetown by the skin of my teeth, actually I graduated 3 credits short at the end of summer school my senior year. I visited the dean, and it was really, you'd think I would have given Georgetown some money after that because they let me skate. I visited the dean. I had like a 2.1 QPI, which is like, you know, C. And I was 3 credits short, and he gave me my diploma. And I mean, it was nice. Otherwise, I probably would never even gotten my college diploma. So what was I going to do then? At the time, I was, my mother was living on the east side of Chicago. Actually, not really. It was Chesterton, Indiana. You all see that movie, The Blues Brothers?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is very close to there. It was Blues Brothers country. And there was a position open as a 6th grade teacher in the local school. And I needed a job. So, you know, she said, why don't you come back here, live at home for a while, and teach school? And I did that for a semester, and just got bored, and then put all my stuff in my car, and went to Washington, D.C., and my objective then, I had a little plan, I hatched a plan for the boredom of living in Blues Brothers country. I decided that I wanted to go to South America and then Africa and seek my fortune, my adventure. And you know, I started taking flying lessons, and at the local airport in Hobart, and got up to other things. This is almost like my college career, except I didn't quite make it. I accumulated 49 hours, including 10 cross-country and 9 cross-country hours. You need 40 hours is the 40 hours is the minimum you need. At least at that time, I think it's the same to get your private pilot's license. So I got enough hours, and you need 10 of those have to be solo cross-country hours, and then you have to take a check ride and a medical and a written test. And then you get your private pilot's license. And I did all of that, except for 1 cross-country hour and my check ride. And then I just decided I didn't want to do it. The reason I was doing that was I figured if I was going to run around South America and Africa, I ought to have as many skills as possible to take advantage of things. Who knows? I might want to steal a plane. I don't know. But anyway, I was doing things like that. You know, I spent my money skydiving. Eventually wound up with 59 jumps, which isn't terribly many, but it's more than most people have. And did a lot of scuba diving, a lot, and off the East Coast and so forth. Anyway, that was what I wanted to do, to go around the Southern Hemisphere and look for trouble. So in order to finance that, once I got to Washington, I was working 2 jobs. I was a substitute school teacher in the combat zone during the day, and I was a waiter and a bartender sometimes at night. So no time to spend money, earning all the time. But, that gets thin working all that much. So a guy recruited me to work for an insurance company, and I did. And I started out selling, learning how to sell to my first category of people were black barbers in Washington, D.C. And very quickly I moved up to lawyers because, well, you got to go where the money is. And the lawyers in Washington, it was obvious to me that they had all the money, they had the power, they were smart guys, people were intimidated by them, so they weren't over-solicited the way doctors are. I mean, salesmen treat doctors like furry little animals that they grab by the scruff of the neck and make them do what they want. But you can't do that with lawyers. So, and I knew how to talk to lawyers. I was selling a contract, an insurance contract, of which there were many, many different varieties, and where the court cases have been decided as to what this phrase or word means and what the other one means. So, I was actually quite clever. I got the best contract there was. It was also very cost-benefit effective contract in addition to being high quality. I'd call, dial for dollars, 1 out of 10 lawyers I'd talk to on the phone, give me an appointment. They almost all had disability or major medical contracts. Those are the other things I'd sell to these law firms. And it was very simple. I'd ask him to bring his contract with me. I put his contract here, my contract, I was familiar with all of them. Show him this, I'd show him the court cases. And it was like shooting fish in a barrel. And I made a lot of money. I was the largest insurance broker in Washington for the 3 largest companies in the business, making a lot of money. And the good thing about that business then is they paid renewal commission, not just the first year, as long as the law firm or the lawyer kept the same office. So that was a good business. But I didn't want to be an insurance salesman. So all this while I was traveling with other world, I still wanted to go off to, especially Africa, and get involved in a revolution someplace. And
So I understand that the questions with regards to planning aren't going to go very well. You set out in Chicago, go to South America, and you turn east and went to Washington. I'm starting to understand how this works. One of the things I've admired many things about you in my life, but very few things about your life that made me jealous, with one exception. I was watching at the Agora conference the other day when you were describing a day in the life of Doug Casey. And a day in the life of Doug Casey in Argentina is getting up, having a cup of coffee, bumbling around, having breakfast on the veranda, taking the horse for a ride, returning, having a shower, bumble around, have orange juice, go to the gym and work out, come back, have lunch, get a massage, a sauna, play billiards with your friends, and went through all this kind of stuff. And absent the entire discussion was anything having to do with work. And it occurred to me, what occurred to me years ago actually, you are the single highest paid hourly worker in the world. And despite that, you've made enormous sums of money, not merely through speculating, but in business. It's my belief, but maybe you can disabuse me of this, that you acquire wealth by generating more utility than you consume. You have absorbed or, accumulated really vast material wealth, really vast utility. How is it that you can generate that much utility in the 2 or 3 hours a month I observe you work and afford days after day after day, as you describe it? How does that work? Am I wrong about how you generate utility, or am I wrong to equate receiving utility for generating utility? I don't want to talk about speculating, because you've also run businesses that made huge amounts of money, seemingly in no time. See, Rose gets in here eventually.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I think the first business venture I ever got involved in. But it all takes capital. And you got to get a little bit of capital together to make it happen. I mean, it's really tough to do a business without capital. I mean, it can be done, I guess, but it's, first thing I did was look for an anomaly in the market. Spent my junior year in college abroad in Switzerland. And it was worthwhile because I learned to speak, at the time it was pretty confident French. But I was always a car guy, always loved cars. And at the time, and there's still anomalies like this. I don't think I've ever actually had a business, Rick, to speak with. I mean,
There's this one called Easy Research, I don't know if you remember that.
Yeah,
The one that plays you now.
yeah, you know, I've got a company now called Casey Research, and I started writing a newsletter in 1979 because I just done crisis investing. It was a huge bestseller, and it was suggested that I do a newsletter. I didn't have a job. I mean, I haven't had a job for 40 years, basically. I really haven't. And, well, actually, I was with a friend of mine, Rick knows well, Frank Juska, who's you know him, he's one of the richest guys in Canada. You know, he started Lionsgate Films and all kinds of stuff. And we were talking about this yesterday, and Frank was saying, you know, with interest rates down here, it's finally starting to dawn on me that I don't have an income. His whole life, too, it's been capital gains. I think Rick's whole life, too. Well, you make some commissions, it's capital gains. In my whole life, it's been capital gains. And this business, Casey Research, you know, yeah, I started a newsletter back in 1979 because, you know, it seemed like you need something to do, and it was income and so forth. But I never managed the thing properly. I was treated like an albatross around my neck. And finally, by about 2001 or 2002 or something like that, I really wanted to put a bullet through its head because I was just tired of doing it. And I was 2 or 3 months behind delivering the product to subscribers, which isn't good. So what happened? My wife suggested, listen, what about David Golan? He's much more of a businessman than I am. He had founded a bank that went on to become a huge bank, actually, but he didn't have anything to do at the moment. So I gave him half of the newsletter, and David built it up like this, and then we gave part of the business to another guy, who actually is a pretty good businessman, and he's built it up. Now we got 60 employees, and I think I know personally about 6 or 7 of them. So that's not me, though. That was just being in the right place at the right time.
That's too simple. Is it, and I'm not trying to be funny now, is it fair to say that you have been generous because you gave away half of the value of business to somebody who took it forward, and then the two of you gave away some of the business who could take it forward more? As perhaps you've got a return on generosity. I mean, certainly you have been able to see opportunities in the market. But I mean, when you describe yourself as having benefited from a series of capital gains, that isn't wholly speaking true. You wrote 4 or 5 best-selling books that, I don't want to spend too much time refreshing your memory, despite the fact that on occasion, with regards to your newsletter, a 12-issue subscription felt like a lifetime subscription. I mean, he doesn't truly publish it periodically. He released letters periodically, as opposed to monthly. I'm still curious how you managed to organize your life, or maybe organize the lives around you. Maybe what you do is you speculate in people as well as you speculate in stocks. Have you thought through this? Because what we're talking about here is how to stop thinking like a serf. And you have lived a spectacular life, and I know you think you've worked hard, but an outside observer would dispute that. And you have got it. I mean, it's spectacular.
No, that's true. I mean, the last real job that I had was when I was selling insurance. And I did become a stockbroker for a while. That's true. So that was out of that by the time I was like, when I wrote the International Man book. See, remember, I've been traveling around the world. Travel's nice and you learn a lot, but there wasn't a book out there that said how you turn going to places, so I wrote a book called The International Man, How to Make the Most of Your Personal Freedom and Financial Opportunity Around the World. I wrote that, and, got it published. I got a $500 advance for that book, but for years, the royalties on it gave me like $3,000 or $4,000 a month, which back in the mid-70s, that was real money. I mean, it's not today so much, but that was real money. And then I read Harry Brown. I mean, that's why you got to read a lot to start with. I read Harry Brown's book, How to Profit from the Coming Devaluation, in about 1970. I said, this makes perfect sense, And it's still a good book today, great book. Harry's a great guy. And started doing what Harry said, buy some gold coins. I didn't know what I was doing, but I was buying some gold stocks. And when the devaluation happened in '71, wham, it all went up. That helped. And then having seen how well Harry did with his book, I said, I could have written this book, and by God, I was right. In 1978, I wrote Crisis Investing. It was published in '79, became the biggest selling book of any type in 1980. Then 1982, because that book was so successful, Simon & Schuster gave me an $800,000 advance on strategic investing. And in 1982, that was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money, but it was really a lot of money back then. And, so one thing leads to another. So I think that's the only real work I've done, actually.
I think my temptation then is to say, in fact, that you are just extremely productive. You were able to generate a lot of utility for millions of readers, having put in many few hours than people who do other things. Do you agree with that?
That is the way it turned out, Rick. That's the way it turned out.
I understand that you planned it by going east when you meant to go south. I get it.
And I have meant to get out of the financial business for many, many years, and I'm going to succeed now. I am going to get out of this business. I've kind of been there, done that, stayed around. I don't believe in doing one thing for too long. So I can, now the Casey research is kind of, I don't know what they do, I don't know how they do it. I don't really care. I just want to be a rentier. I want to collect the dividends, and that's what I do.
So I'm going to
got something new coming up.
I'm going to take one more crack at these sort of self-help questions before I move on. You described yourself, and I think most people would be prepared to agree, as extremely lucky.
Very lucky.
I don't believe in luck, except when I ponder on your life. I mean, there is some next to me empirical evidence, but I distrust it. I think there are some origins to luck. I think people make their luck. And I don't think that you're dishonest enough that you would disagree with that. So what I want you to tell me is, and I mean, the envy is pouring out of me now.
Rick is one of the hardest working guys I've ever met in my life.
In terms of how you find your ambition bumbled from success to success, it is not true that happened at random. It is not true that you got ahead by going to Washington and then to go to South America. It is not true that you, well, maybe it is true that you got ahead by almost flunking out of Georgetown. I get that one. I had a similar experience at the University of British Columbia, so I do get that one. You didn't let the university get too much in the way of education. But how did you consistently get so lucky? You don't believe in God, so it's not like you dodged lightning and got shown the light.
Actually, I put a lot of stumbling blocks my own way. It would have been helpful if I had believed in God, because more people would have liked me and trusted me. Atheists are the least liked and trusted group in America. There's what I've read. I mean, that's what they say. The average American dislikes atheists more than thinks he dislikes communists or anything. So it would have been helpful if I'd been more conventional. But I think the answer is that luck favors the prepared mind. So how do you prepare your mind? Well, you try to learn all the skills that you can and accumulate all the knowledge you can. And I've always read a lot. And I've always tried to learn a lot of different stuff. It's not academic. So, and the more you know, when you see something, you know how stuff fits together, and you can see the opportunities. Well, like that first business that I got into, first real business, always been a car guy. And when I was in Europe as an exchange student, I like to check the values out of cars. I mean, there wasn't the internet in those days, and there wasn't a lot of communication between different countries. You got the mail, and the telephones were really expensive transatlantic in those days. So I said, what do these cars cost? I knew what cars cost in the US, I didn't know what cars cost in Europe, really. So, Ferraris. Everybody wants a Ferrari. So I looked, and whoa, looking around, there was a guy down in Milan who was selling a 250 GTE Ferrari. It's a V12 car. You know that 1966, 1965, 66 2+2 Mustang? They stole the design from Ferrari. It's really kind of a little modified knockoff of it. So I went down there, and beautiful car. And I bought that car for $3,050 that I borrowed from my mother. And I drove it up to Switzerland. I drove it all across Europe. I raced it 2 places at Monza and Montreal. We could do that in those days. Can't do that stuff anymore. And, I rid that car hard and put it away wet. But I sold it after accurately describing it in Car and Driver magazine, to a guy in Solon, Ohio. I remember $3,750 6 months later. And, that's a good pass. Free car for 6 months, make $750. The shipping from Rotterdam to New York was going to be $600. Okay. And there were other expenses, but I kind of proved the concept. I had already gone back down to Milano and picked out a 330 GT plus 2 and had the bit in my teeth. And this was in the days before pollution controls, when you could do all this stuff, no problems. And, the rest is history. I got into a catastrophic accident on my way to Rotterdam. I was in the hospital for 6 weeks and nearly died. I broke my right leg in 17 different places and lots of other stuff. So I'm just lucky I'm alive. And I never got back into that business. But if I hadn't been, interested in cars, I'd never have known to look for that anomaly. Why was it an anomaly, incidentally? Because in those days, in Europe, if you were a rich guy, you bought a new Ferrari. And if you were a poor guy, you bought a new Fiat. But there wasn't really the middle class that there is today. And a middle class guy wouldn't dream of, for social reasons and maintenance reasons, wouldn't dream of buying a used Ferrari. So the bottom fell out of it, between the new ones and the used ones. It was an anomaly, but in the US, totally different market. Everybody thought they wanted a Ferrari. Nobody could afford a new one, but a used one, yeah. Perfect anomaly. They'll no longer exist, but so that's the idea.
That's the kernel of an answer. I'm getting somewhere. I suspect in your youth, with regards to this auto business too, that you were probably less privileged in terms of paying tax than might have been.
Well, I wouldn't have paid any tax back then, because in those days, they couldn't keep track of you the way they can now. They just couldn't. You could open up I remember when I opened up a Swiss bank account as a student there. Because, you had to have someplace to cash the check that you get from home and, keep some money to spend. And just walk down to the bank and I don't know what I even showed them. It must have been a driver's license. I client could, it's a different world.
So I want to move on from this stuff. One of the interesting conversations that I remember having with you at Eris years ago involved charity. And I remember you saying, in response to my suggestion that I was giving some money to XYZ, that it was a total waste of time, and it was counterproductive. What I should do is keep my money in my jeans, reinvest it in my business, generate utility for my customers, employ some people, and I shouldn't encourage people to become slaves to my generosity. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about, explain to this group your theories with regards to charity, your theories with regards to Bill Gates should be reinvesting in technology as opposed to Gates Foundation, things like that.
Now, I disapprove of charity because it's, generally speaking, the way all these big charities are organized, or almost all of them, anyway, I think, is that they basically just are they're black holes for money. They give it to useless mouths to be fed, cements them, give them their bad habits by giving them free shit, and dissipates the capital. And capital is what humanity needs to grow and prosper, but it's bitter and dissipated. So it's bad from every point of view. It's bad for the recipient, it's bad for society, it's even bad for the giver because it makes him feel like he's a big shot and so forth. So if you really want to be charitable, find somebody, or you don't have to find them, they'll find you. You just have to sort them out that need some help, size the person up for all the things you look for in a person, and make them alone and tell them, I want the money back. You know, I want the money back. This isn't to feed you for a week. This is to be productive with it. And I've done that, and sometimes I've gotten the money back, and sometimes I don't. And when I don't get it back, well, that's fine. I learned what kind of a person it is, much more cheaply than it might cost me in other ways, actually. So I don't care. And if I get the money back, then I've also learned something. And so that's my idea of charity. It's kind of a little bit of a pay it forward type of thing, but I wouldn't dream of giving all these fundraisers and all that where, it's just so rich guys can play big shot. And yeah, I've done that simply because I wanted to go to the party or something like that, but I have zero interest in people's charities.
Then, just for fun, how would you describe the cycle? The Freedom School knockoff that Casey Research spends money on in Eastern Europe, or your occasional participation with myself in things like Students for Liberty. Mistakes?
Well, I don't know. We do things like that, but we're not really giving them something. I mean, and it's amusing, and I don't know. It's not serious giving. I mean,
You do a little harm, not great harm. Is that
it's ideological indoctrination, so perhaps that. Yeah, I don't know.
We're coming to that. So, one of the things that interests me, Doug, is that for somebody who's so determinedly non-charitable, it would seem to me that in Casey Research and in Agora both, what we have are in one way, shape, or form extremely profitable charities. Because I don't know two organizations in the world that are doing a better job of propagandizing for liberty. I notice in your own writing, occasionally you condescend to write about investments, which is what people tell you for, but mostly what you're doing is propagandizing for freedom and liberty. And I certainly see that in Agora as well. Agora puts out literally probably trillions of pieces of spam, emails that are allegedly oriented towards making money, but there's an extraordinarily strong freedom message. And I don't think that any of the freedom organizations in the world, I'm not making this up, literally any freedom organization in the world, in fact, probably there is the totality of the freedom organizations in the world are putting out less lines of pro-liberty propaganda than Casey Research and Agora, and yet Casey Research and Agora are certainly self-replicating organizations. Is this where you're trying to get?
That is a very good point, Rick, actually. And it's correct. All these NGOs and nonprofit organizations, there's a number of libertarian ones, they don't give any money to Cato or things like that. So, some wannabe libertarian intellectual can sit in the plush office and maybe write a paper that nobody's going to read every couple of months. It's ridiculous. Anything that's worth doing is worth doing for a profit. And if you can't make money doing it, that is proof the market doesn't want what you're offering them. That's simple. So I don't believe in these NGOs and nonprofits and stuff like that. They're black holes for money. And I think that you can promote the idea of personal liberty and freedom and get paid for it. You get a twofer. It's a much better idea. That's absolutely right. Yeah, totally.
Another apparent contradiction that I want to talk to you about is, you've been at pains, first of all, not to describe yourself as a libertarian as a consequence of the fact that libertarians have parties. And you've been accurate and vociferous in terms of your attempting to persuade me not to participate in any form of political action. And I remember at the Liberty Conference some years ago, you came across the room, looked down that long nose at me, put your arm around me, and said, "Come over here to the couch." I knew something was going to go wrong. He said, "Sit down." Submissively, I said, he said, "Get out your checkbook." Oh, shit. And he said, "Now I just wrote a big check to Harry Brown, and you have to do it too. So, if I'm eschewing Libertarian Party politics and not involving myself in political action, why did you extort that money from me?"
Well, because you're a rich guy and didn't notice it was even gone.
It hurts me to this day.
Well, Harry Brown was just a super guy, and he became misguided in his later years. He wrote a fantastic book called, which I still recommend today, called "How I Found Freedom in an Unfree World," and in which he explained why he wasn't involved in politics, why he married, and all kinds of things. And he recanted on most of that stuff, especially including political stuff when he decided to run for president. And I know you were a big donor, and I know Bob Bishop was a big donor, but I believe I was the largest single donor to his campaign because, not because I believed in politics, but just because I liked Harry, and I wanted to support Harry, and also, Harry said if he was elected, he would make me chief of the secret police.
You know, Doug, I have to jump up and continue this line of thought before Walter goes out and play. When I saw Harry in the face, personally, for me, it was worth every time I spent because I could rationalize that I wasn't attempting to win over other people and enslave them through the use of force. What I was doing was playing, because Harry was never going to get that. I
thought he'd do a lot better.
Yeah, we weren't acting immorally. We were actually sort of vandals, not thieves, I think. And what really appealed to me, and the way that I came to really thank you for talking me into giving the money, is all the stuff that I wanted to say where my tongue would get tied because I would get angry. Like if I had been in those debates, I'd be in prison to this day. And Harry did such a spectacular job. So the way I rationalized it is, first of all, I was doing no harm. And second of all, what I was really doing was paying this guy to be a propagandist. Am I letting myself out too easy?
No, I think you're right, Rick. I mean, specialization and division of labor. I mean, you felt like you wanted to say some things, and there's nobody could say it better than Harry. So, yeah, I felt that way myself. Yeah, that's good. It's a good other reason. Yeah.
I want to go back to something that Doug said on leadership and self-esteem. And you weren't here for it, but he was talking about the reasons that people leave. Not the reasons that people seek power, I think, but the reasons that people leave. I've noticed in your life that you are an unconscious leader, and in fact, you are an unwilling leader. You sort of seek to avoid leadership. And I don't mean this disrespectfully. Is that because you're lazy, or because you want to avoid the responsibility of leading? I mean, why is it that naturally a thought leader like yourself, a confident person that people are attracted to, why is it that the head of KC Research, the guy whose name is on the door, as an example, wants nothing to do with leading?
Yeah, it's true. My company has these weekly, mostly weekly telephonic hour conferences for all the editors. I don't even go to those things because I don't want to influence these other people or whatever. And I don't like leaders. I don't follow leaders. I'm a gamma rat, and you all know the difference between alpha, beta, and gamma rats. They found scientists, this is years ago, this is a true story. They found that there were alpha rats. Everybody knew there were those. You know, they took the best territories, chose the best looking mates of the opposite sex, and beat up the beta rats. And then there were the beta rats that took the leavings, whatever's left over from the alpha rats, and just got beat up by them. But that, okay, there's no cosmic breakthrough there. Everybody knows that's the way it works. But then they found there were gamma rats, and the gamma rats also staked out the best territories and mates, but they didn't beat up the beta rats, and they didn't take any crap from the alpha rats. Oh, this is actually interesting. Those were libertarian rats. And I intuitively feel that way. And I don't I mean, it's a good thing I almost went into the Army, or actually with the Marines. And actually, I could have. If I joined the French Foreign Legion, I probably would have shot my officer, deserted, and be a wanted criminal today. But I don't like to take orders. It's what I always say is, hey, it's not that I have a problem with authority. I just don't like people telling me what to do. So I don't like to tell other people what to do either. I just,
I think the description of you as a gamma rat is really, really accurate. One of the things I've noticed in terms of talking about various aspects of freedom philosophy is that you're sort of ambivalent about the part prohibiting the initiation of use of force. I remember you saying once that, in terms of a discussion of taking anti-state action, would you do it through the use of force or violence? And you said, well, preferably violence, but of course, yes. What I'm interested in is, does this sort of follow on that old criminal Robert McNamara's suggestion about preemptive counterinsurgency, where you kill the Vietnamese before they become Viet Congs?
well, remember what I said earlier about moral laws, the state makes thousands of laws, and then there's some people say, well, I just need the 10 Commandments. That's total bullshit. The first 3 of them are, how to take orders from something that doesn't even exist, and the other 7 are just a bunch of nostrums, the primitive desert tribe put together, and everybody thinks the 10 Commandments are great. They're not. Incidentally, there are 2 different sets of 10 Commandments in the Bible. Reader. But this is why I think that the whole of the law is do as thou wilt, but be prepared to accept the consequences. Now, if I believe that, I also believe there are some people out there that just need killing. I don't want to initiate force, but at the same time, maybe I'm just responding to force they've initiated. I'm going to explore this subject in great detail in, I'm doing a sextet of novels. It's not enough to do one novel. We've got to do 6. More big ones too, fat ones. And this will be the number 3 novel called Assassin, where our hero goes through 6 unjustly besmirched occupations, and we show that they're actually good things. Speculator, drug dealer, assassin, terrorist, warlord, and antichrist. And we show that you can be a good guy doing all of these things. And so I'm going to explore the rights and wrongs as well as the how-tos and the do's and the don'ts of being an assassin, a terrorist, and a warlord. I'll cover that question in a lot more detail.
The truth is, before any of us manage to achieve the status that you suggest would be nice if we achieved, a group of warlords, we live where we are. Despite the fact that you issue politics, you live in a world that's political. You don't choose to vote. But what I was interested in some years ago is you describing to me at dinner once that if you did theoretically think that there was something legitimate about voting, that your vote was your property. And that since you didn't see any particular difference between Democrats and Republicans, or in fact libertarians. And since your vote in this contest was a wasting asset, that you ought to be able to sell it. That if you were going to get, if what an election was when it's an advanced auction of stolen property, and you were going to get into the property, at least you could sell your right to participate. Isn't that?
I think that makes a lot of sense. Because your vote has zero value, really. But after the election's over, it has totally zero value. So maybe you should sell it. It's like a night in a hotel room. I mean, if it's not sold, it's worthless the next day. So, yeah, I mean, of course, since it doesn't matter who you vote for, the guy once he's in office is going to do whatever he wants to do anyway. And he doesn't know you personally voted for him. You're like a grain of sand on the beach that voted for him. So, yeah. Makes sense to me.
And I'd like to move from that to more self-organized forms of social interaction. One of the things that has always amused me about your sense of how the world should be organized is your whole concept of files. And I realize it's your concept of files, but I suggest that you popularize it more than the person who originated the concept. Perhaps you could describe your vision of files and how you've organized your world with groups of people who use you and provide utility to you.
Yeah, that concept came from Stevenson, Neil Stevenson, in his book Diamond Age, which is a really good book. All Stevenson's stuff is really good, actually, where he posits that in the near-term future, it's 50 years from now, something like that, the world, the nation-states will largely cease to exist, and people will organize themselves according to files, which is to say, what was important to them. Political values, philosophical values, religious, occupational, thousands of things. And I think the world is organizing itself that way, and especially since I've found that most libertarians or freedom-loving people have trouble finding other people who think the way they do. I mean, you talk to the average chimpanzee out there on the streets about a philosophical concept, and he thinks you're crazy. So, you know,
You just mean this.
I think we're genetic mutants, actually, and so, of course, and I've felt for a long time that a libertarian anarchist can't mate psychologically with the average chimpanzee out there mentally, then you can mate with a real chimpanzee physically. So I actually think we might be speciating on mental grounds. So yeah, history research has these files files, and no guarantees, but they tend to be pretty libertarian oriented. There's one here in Vancouver, I'm sure. So,
You've given us a whole,
put that all together.
you've given us a range of disturbing images, Doug. Perhaps you could describe for us some of the files that you see yourself inhabiting now. I don't necessarily mean the ones organized through Casey Research, but some of the voluntary communities, because I know you exist in more than one, and others that you would seek to become involved in. Which sort of communities would you like to see spontaneously organized, or in fact, which ones are you interested in enough that you could bumble your way into heading to Washington as opposed to Santiago, as an example, of South America? If you could actually the cause occur. What organizations, what communities are you part of, and do you see yourself becoming part of in the future?
Oh, I don't know. I was in Las Vegas a few weeks ago, supposedly for Freedom Fest, which is worthwhile going to, but like all things, degrades over time. The second law of thermodynamics works on everything. So the real reason I went there was to play poker, actually, in the World Series, and Caesar's Poker Room, which was there. So I'm a member of the poker playing group, but I don't like it very much, because I don't like most of these people who play poker, frankly. I mean, lowlifes. So I'm a member of that group.
A low-life file.
Yeah, it really is. Actually, I founded a community in South America called Estancia de Cafajate, and it's very upmarket, and it's really a rather fantastic place with everything that I want. And I don't make my coffee or my orange juice. It's not orange juice, it's grapefruit juice. My maid makes it. And she's very happy to earn about $600 or $800 a month. I don't know if we can get a maid up here that'll cook all your meals and clean all your clothes and tidy up your house and make you a latte whenever you want for $600 or $800 a month, but you can in Argentina, Estancia. So I'm a member of that file down there where there are a bunch of almost entirely like-minded people that, are hanging out in the middle of nowhere, very nice middle of nowhere in Argentina. So I'm a member of that file. Jeff Brewer was starting one in Chile like that. I don't know, but I'll tell you what my project for the last 30 years has been. It's I don't want to just start a community someplace. You got to have a country with political independence, and in 10 different places, I pitched the government on radical reform. Sometimes really seriously. I mean, with the president several times actually. And it's a lot of fun. And the next places on my dance card, I think, are going to be Central African Republic, which most people don't know exists, and Sao Tome and Principe, which is probably even more obscure than Central African Republic. So I like places like that.
And describe this vision, because you got into the riff without really telling people what you had proposed for these places, because I think this is very interesting.
What I do is it's not hard to get sit-downs with these guys. Surprisingly easy in any of these countries. Like that. I could go there cold in a week, be sitting down with the president. I know I can. I've done it before. So what's the deal I pitch them? I say, look, I have a plan that'll do 3 things for you. Number 1, it'll make you legitimately very wealthy. You can't steal money like Mobutu and Marcos and those guys did. That's kind of a thing of the past. Well, sounds good. Number 2, you will make the people love you. You'll be like the George Washington of this country. And that beats everybody wanting to kill you. Okay, tell me more. And the third thing is it'll put you on the front cover of every magazine in the world for the next decade in a favorable light. Oh, tell me more. So I did, and I give them a radical plan for free marketization of the country. Ideally, we're taking 100%, this is why I like old people's republics run by military dictators best, where we take 100% of all the assets of the government, everything, initially put it into one big corporation, distribute the shares, 70% of the shares pro-rata to every man, woman, and child in the country. Just pro-rata. 15% in trust for the next generation, born over the next 21 years, because most of their parents are one way or another going to piss it away. So they're not going to have anything to inherit. And 10% for people that are going to be of significant help to the enterprise. Well, someone like yourself, for instance, Mr. President. The last 5% we use to raise capital, by taking the country public in New York, London, and Tokyo, and everywhere else. And I've had really interesting adventures doing this. So that's the plan that I pitch. It's very, very amusing. I can tell you why these things go wrong and so forth. But it's really a lot of fun.
Maybe you could, because this is one of my all-time favorite Casey stories, recount your adventure pitching the guy who ran, I guess it was Suriname, and your discussion of ancillary benefits to the walls. Remember that story?
Actually, that wasn't Suriname. I spent a month in Suriname doing this, back when Desi Bouterse was running the place, and they were actually considering performing therapy on Suriname the way that they did on Grenada at the same time. But this actually happened. In the first place, I actually tried this. The very first was Dominica, not Suriname. And so, what I did then, and I don't do this anymore, but, because I usually can get better introductions now. But when I went to Dominica, obscure, little independent country in the Caribbean, so I went there and I did, what am I going to do? There's no beaches there, I saw the island. So I opened the Yellow Pages, which they had at the time, and looked for lawyers and real estate agents. Why? Because they have all the money and all the power, and they know everybody, naturally. So, they interviewed a lot of these guys. They're happy to talk to you because you're a foreigner, you might be rich, well, they know. So, I met with this one guy, and we got along very well. He was a very personable guy. And he says, what you want to do is meet my brother Kenny. He's the director of the Industrial Development Bank here, for a little country of 80,000 people with no industry. So anyway, but it's the government agency that's in charge of developing the country, such as it is. So he sets it up, and he's a black guy, and he figures I'm an Uhuru jumper, which is pretty accurate. And so we're talking, blah, 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 blah. So I hatched this plan, actually kind of on the spot. And I said, Kenny, why don't we take like one of these mountain tops here, and it's crown land, and we can put it in a corporation. So the corporation's got the assets that the government makes, and for people that invest in the corporation, say $50,000, we make them economic citizens of Dominica. And I think we can sell 1,000 of these passport citizenships. That's $50 million. This is much more money than they've ever seen in their lives. Why do I say that? Because Dominica, this is exactly the time when they were invading Grenada. And this is Dominica, her name was Eugenia Charles. Dominica was paid $1 million by some agency of the U.S. government so that Mrs. Charles could be the nominal head of the invasion force of Grenada. It wasn't Ronald Reagan, it was Eugenia Charles. You gotta have a shill in front to make it sanitized. It's just amazing. So anyway, I told him about this, and I said, and then when we get $50 million in there, I was starting to think we can do a lot with this, and this is what his mandate is. So we talked about it, we talked some more, and I said, and after we get that money in there, and we got the land in there, continuing source of income, I said, maybe we can take this company public internationally in New York. And let's say that we take it public at $1, and people that are of significant help to the corporation, I looked him straight in the eye, so talking to him, might get 1 million warrants at $1. And the stock goes to $10, and I'm hoping, since he's the director, that we can do simple arithmetic. Let me see. 1 million times $9. Yeah. Okay. So anyway, then there's a pregnant pause. Two guys don't know each other very well for like a minute. And you know what he says to me then? The next thing's out of his mouth after this. You know, Douglas, I would like you to tell me more about those warrants. So I did, and 10 minutes later, he goes off and calls Mrs. Charles and sets up an appointment for me the next morning with her. And this could have been, and now, as it turns out, Dominica, along with St. Kitts, is one of the 2 countries that has these passport programs. I want to go down there. I'm going to find Kenny and tell him, you know, where's mine? Yeah, exactly. I'm going to, but I don't want to go to Dominica again. It's at the end of the road. But I do want to. I'd like to confront him and see if he comes across. So anyway, did I see Mrs. Charles? It turns out that very night, her father, who is deathly ill, dies. Just one of those weird things. And it's going to be a Caribbean funeral, and I'd have to stick around, grieve and all this stuff for, a week. And like an idiot, I didn't do it. I should have. And once again, my whole life would be different. Could have been if I stuck around. But that's how these things happen. So you got to go out and meet people, not just read stuff. But I don't want to do that anymore. I'd rather just read a book these days.
So, in terms of how to avoid thinking like a serf, you've certainly given us a lot of ammo. We need to take countries public. We need to go east when we're headed south. We have to not work very hard. We have to avoid charity. This is an interesting list. Did anybody anticipate this is where we're going to go? I think I've arrived at a dead end with you, Doug. It's pretty certain to me that you're not thinking like a serf. It's also pretty obvious to me that you have a lot to teach, and there's a lot of pupils here. So I think what I'd like to do now, for the time we have left, is let other people interrogate you. Jayan, you should take this and all.
It's a short question, and then he goes to another, depending on the answer. How do you feel about countries having police?
Well,
or states or cities having police?
Well, look, if the government is kind of like centralized geoforce, that's the nature of government, then government, if it's going to do anything, the only legitimate functions are to protect you from force. Army, force outside, bailiwick, police, force inside, court system, force adjudication without resorting to force. But my personal belief, so yeah, in a Randite society, those are the 3 acceptable functions. But on the other hand, those 3 functions are so important that they shouldn't be left to the type of scumbags that usually work for government. Much too important to be left to government. So I think it would be done better by the free market personally, much better. Yes, sir.
So I met this guy who had this great idea. He's completely nuts, but what he did was he said he went to North Korea and talked to all the generals and stuff who ran North Korea and also some important people in South Korea and convinced them that if they privatize North Korea, if they privatize North Korea, they could basically buy all the generals off and then have a free country. Could this have also been, is this a good idea and could it have been done in Russia instead of the way it was done?
Well, it's very hard to change the order in places. It really is. North Korea, might be a place where it would work. There everybody's taking orders from, just a very few people up on top. So if you make the sale with them, because it's to their personal advantage, it might work. It'd be hardest to do in the United States. I've said this many times, that if through some crazy set of circumstances, Ron Paul had been elected this last time and tried to radically, you can't just pare these things back. You have to eliminate them totally, pull them up by the roots, and throw salt and Roundup on the ground afterwards. But if he had, he would have gotten, first of all, the average American chimpanzee would have rioted. Because, there aren't just 50 million people on food stamps in the United States. Everybody knows that. That's just one program. There are 14 other free food programs offered by the Department of Agriculture. And if you add in those other 14 programs, there are 103 million Americans getting food assistance from the U.S. government. There's a free lunch program, a whole bunch of things like food stamps. So the chimpanzees would riot, number one. Number two, the congressman would try to impeach him. It would be just like in 2001, Space Odyssey. You remember that when the monkeys were all around the watering hole fighting for resources? That's what Congress would look like. So that would happen. They'd impeach him. But the most important thing by far is he'd get visits from the top generals and the heads of the FBI, CIA, NSA, DEA, all of these. There's dozens of these agencies like that now. And they tell him, maybe not so subtly, that this isn't going to happen. So it couldn't happen. You can't break all these people's rice bowls. It's going to have to fall apart. So the best prospect is a shithole like North Korea, actually. Not the United States, that's all. I think. Anything can happen, of course.
Doug, do you think a major blocking proposal to these leaders that if they accepted your plan, they'd be rich, safe, and loved, that you're asking them to go cold turkey on their addiction, which Lord Acton nailed, and that is their addiction to absolute power, which they've been giving them?
Yeah, I know. I could recount, my different adventures. These guys a lot of them are quite weak too. One early thing was when South Africa was getting rid of apartheid, they set up, I think there were 6 or 7 so-called Bantustan. And I met the leader of one of them, Siskay, and it was the Brigadier Upagauza. And it was really just fascinating. It was like a little caged weasel in this gigantic office sitting in the back of this aircraft carrier for a desk. And so I started my pitch with me. They had armed guards in the hallways. It was really just like out of a movie. And I gave him my pitch. And after about 10 minutes, he says, Douglas, what is very important to me is I have to have any money. I don't have any money. He wanted to steal, but he didn't know how. There wasn't enough money to steal. He couldn't figure it out. So anyway, I spent time with the brig, the reason that scheme all fell apart was because his Minister of Finance was his chief, he was a rich guy, a rich African guy. And I know that the Minister of Finance, who knew how to steal and wasn't giving, the brig wasn't smart enough to figure there's always something. They don't want to give up the power, but you can, you're playing with people's minds here. And anything's possible when you play with people's minds. And it's fun, because these guys are supposed to be big deals. They're on television somehow. Well, not these obscure little companies, but, So, yeah, you just have to, anything's possible. These guys not only all put their pants on in the morning like everybody else does, but they're just, you can do anything. That's what I would get across. The only reason why I don't actually actually do anything is because, you know, at this stage in my life, I mean, I'd be perfectly happy just sitting in a lotus posture all day and just smelling the roses. I mean, I've kind of been there and done that. And do I need any more amusement? I guess I get bored after a while. Yeah, you should try this stuff.
I have a criticism of that and also a suggestion. My suggestion is Detroit. You don't have to go to Korea. Detroit, it will use your benefit. The criticism is, Doug is a bloody liar. He says he doesn't do charity, but he comes to Loyola University of New Orleans at my invitation. He comes for free. And a guy like this can get 20, 30, 40, 50,000 just for one speech. And he gives it to me for free. He's done it for 5 or 6 years. He's a brilliant liar.
But Walter, that's because I like you. And I don't think it would work in Detroit because, yeah, maybe you could do something with that local government, but then you got to deal with the state of Michigan and the Wayne County and the U.S. government. I think it's got to collapse further. Oh, I see.
Hey Doug, I just want to say you're one of the coolest guys I've ever had the pleasure of meeting. You just did a really calm, cool, like back in the evening, and I find it really fascinating for someone who's so anti-state, or what many people call it anti-state. So my question is, how do you manage to stay out of jail? How do you manage not to be assassinated, or making enemies who would do that to you? Like, what's your advice? Let's say young people who probably want to stay, out of harm's way without police.
Well, I don't know. It's funny, when I was in Cameroon, and I was pitching the government there, so I was the country's got 2 capitals, and I think I was in the one in the middle of the country, Yaoundé, and so I was staying at the Intercontinental Hotel. And since there weren't many English-speaking foreigners that go there, I met the guy who runs the hotel. And so he said, "What are you doing here?" And I told him. And I explained it to him, and he says, "Chef, remind me not to ride in the car with you." He lived there. He knew what that place was like. But I never had any trouble at all. And I think the reason is because the bad guys really just don't take this stuff seriously enough. They see it as kind of being like, who's going to kill Don Quixote? I mean, they don't take them seriously. So I think that's the reason. But I'll tell you one thing that I have found. I regret to tell you this, but I'm 67 years old. And I can't believe, I still see myself as being like 30 when I was, really at my age. And the years just go by so quickly, and now it's worse than that. It's worse than that. It accelerates. And there are reasons for this. It's the ground rush effect. When you first jump out of the plane, it's like, it's all forever. And then the ground comes up faster. And that's the way it is with life. So if you're going to do something, don't wait too long to do it. That would be my advice. And don't worry, they're not going to take you seriously when you try to do it. So there's really not a lot of danger. But get out of your own country, go to some country where the government doesn't consider you their property, they'll consider you the other country's property. And if they don't like you, they'll just tell you to go away. If they don't like you here, they'll do bad stuff to you. If you're a foreigner, the worst thing that happens usually is they just say, "Get out of town." Okay, that's cool.
So I appreciate, you're older, you just want to sit in the lotus position, but what if you were, with your wisdom now, if you were a younger person living in today's world, like a lot of people here, looking to make a fortune, what would you do to sort of acquire capital in terms of what sort of skills would you be looking to acquire, and sort of areas of opportunity in terms of businesses do you think that you would see now that young people can get into?
Well, you know, the ancient Romans had it quite correct. They said, mens sana in corpore sano, sound mind and a sound body. So you should do everything you can to nurture those two things, physically and mentally. That's number one. And the other things that I said before. And what's the area of business that I would look at? I mean, it's better answer this than I am, actually. But I would get out of Dodge, and I would travel to the poorest, most backward place you can find. And here's why. Because here in Vancouver, yeah, there's a lot of money here, and you got a lot of, you know, but everybody here's got a lot of experience, connections, knowledge, but everybody's got them. So you don't have anything that distinguishes you here. You're one of a million other upmarket people here. I mean, that's a competitive market. If you go to some shithole, though, you're going to have experiences, knowledge, connections, capital, much more than any of the locals have. And you're different. So people are going to want to reach out to you and meet you. You can go to some nothing, nowhere place, and in a week, you're going to find you're moving with the top of society. So that's why you got to get out of it. You got to stop thinking like a serf. You're a really, you know, comfortable serf here. Very comfortable serf. It's very nice here. This is my favorite city maybe in the world, for that matter. It's comfortable. But if you really want to make money, you've got to go someplace else. And my personal view is Africa is the best place to be for that, from that point of view. Not a lifestyle point of view, but from a want to make money point of view. That's what I would say.
Sort of like you, I'm a little bit disappointed in what Freedom Fest has become. I ended up going this year, and no matter what session I was at, the academic, the political, the economic ones, everybody would have the exact same message, which was there's a brick wall that we're all rushing towards, and we should all be very panicked about stepping on the gas pedal as soon as possible. My question to you is, as an anarchist, shouldn't we be advocating for the government in the United States to step on the gas?
Yeah, that's a very good point. Well, you know, I gotta tell you, here's an admission. At heart, I think I'm a Leninist. And one of the reasons I say that is because Lenin said, the worse it gets, the better it gets. So, yeah, I think it's all gonna blow up. This cycle, I mean, if they don't, it's going to be really fascinating to watch how they dodge the bullet as we go back into the hurricane this time. But, so what do you do about that? I'm not looking forward to it. I am intellectually, because one of the most important things in life is to be right. So I got to admit, I've got an intellectual vested interest in the collapse of Western civilization because I want to be right. But on the other hand, I realize it's going to be really unpleasant and really inconvenient. So which do I value more? I don't know. It depends on the mood I'm in at the moment. But yeah, I think it's going to happen. But I hope I'm wrong because you know, I like pleasant things too. So, but I like exciting things. So either way.
Next question comes on.
So Doug, I'm wondering about, you're a grandparent and about children, people that are under 12 or something. And I know it's very difficult in the school systems to try to teach about some of these different ideas. So I'm wondering if you have some suggestions. One of the things, of course, is reading. So this summer we're reading 1984, Brave New World with my children. I've taken them to Africa, things like that. But some other things you might suggest as a grandparent to your grandchildren, all of us that have children might think of ways that we can inspire and build new files and develop that with the younger generation.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea. And I think that's a wonderful idea. I haven't had children, at least to my knowledge. But I prefer to invest in dogs and horses. So, I kind of missed that boat. But
What's those chimpanzees?
a lot of people, I'm not sure I put that much stock in kids because it's a lottery. I don't have an invested interest in my own genes because your genes have a life of their own, and they view you as nothing but a survival machine for them. Well, I don't give a damn. They don't give a damn about me, and I don't give a damn about them. I got my own plans. So, I don't care about my genes, and therefore I got no vested interest in reproduction. Once again, I'm in many ways a fan of the Romans, and the way they used to do this was, if you adopted somebody, and they wouldn't adopt anybody until they can clearly see what they were getting. So you couldn't reasonably hope to be adopted by a rich Roman until you were at least 12 or something like that, so they could see how you were shaping up. And then so I think that's the best thing to do. Is adopt a kid, not be a kid. You don't have to worry about those messy years early on and so forth. So I think that's good. No, I think it's good to corrupt the youth as much as you can, but not necessarily reproduce them. Although on the other hand, maybe if libertarians are a genetic mutation, but we don't. We should reproduce more. But then I don't know. I'm ambivalent about it, and I might feel differently tomorrow. Who knows?
Well, that makes me a little bit more scared of my question. At the beginning of your talk, you said that you believe about 80% of people are good. Then you referred to people as chimpanzees over and over.
Yeah.
As a solipsist, this is going to be a difficult one to answer, but would you say overall you feel it positive about the human condition or negative? Are you optimistic about the way human beings are, or do you think we're all doomed?
Well, that is a really good question. That's a really good question. I'm very ambivalent about that, actually. I'm very ambivalent about it. I mean, for all I know, maybe we're only here on this planet because this is a prison planet, and we've all been put here for committing crimes and misdemeanors elsewhere in the universe. I mean, I don't know. Anything's possible. I mean, I think science fiction is the best reference for this. I just don't know. Should you be optimistic? Yeah. Should get off of this planet, go to the stars, speciate further. Okay. Maybe it'll be a story with a happy ending a million years from now, or I don't know. That is a really cosmic question. Yeah. Don't know. Because Pareto's law, there's a lot of variations on it. I'm of the opinion, it's just an opinion, 80% of people are basically good and decent. But on the other hand, maybe only if you use another application of the 80-20 rule, depending on how you're feeling at the moment, maybe you say that 20% of them are really good libertarians, and then you take 20% of that 20%, and I don't know. It's so many things are arbitrary, aren't they? I don't know. No hard and fast answers.
John asked me to ask a quick question, which I can do, but the answer might be very long. Benjamin Franklin, when after the Constitution Committee was complete, was asked, "What kind of government did you give us?" And he said, "A republic, if you can keep it." Well, Benjamin Franklin and the rest of the Constitution Committee were anti-democracy, very much so. What could Benjamin Franklin and others have done to have prevented the morphing from a republic to a democracy?
Well, the first thing they could have done was not have that constitutional convention in 1789. It was really a coup. I mean, the Articles of Confederation, I think we're doing reasonably well. And they thought, well, let's, improve a few things, but they threw them out and put in a central government. Yeah, I think that we'd all be so much better off, Americans and Canadians both, absolutely, if there hadn't been that Constitution, the 13 colonies had stayed 13 separate governments. That means that the Louisiana Purchase with all that land from Napoleon would never have been made. That would have been several more countries. All that other stuff wouldn't have been purchased. The U.S. wouldn't have become the superpower that it is to go on the rampage. You'd have a whole bunch of, I like Argentina as a place to hang out, but it'd be more convenient if I had like 15 different countries in North America, including each province up here being independent to hang out. So I've answered the question by saying they shouldn't have had that constitutional convention.
Thank you very much, Rick and Doug. So unless Rick wants to continue. Thank you again, and there's lunch waiting for you outside. We'll get together again at 1 o'clock.